Hey there, folks. Eric Walls, field agronomist with Sun Ag. On this week's episode of Fieldside Chats, we're going to dive into soil sampling. We can test our soils anytime that they're not frozen, and we know that the weather does play into our results. So if our soils are overly wet or overly dry, it will have an impact on our pH, P, and K results. I prefer soil sampling to be done in the springtime prior to any tillage that we might do. When we perform tillage, that introduces air to the soil profile, and it's a little bit more difficult to get a consistent soil core. So we want to test to like a 7-inch depth. If you have tilled in the springtime and are wanting to take soil samples, I would recommend that you wait till it's rained a few times to settle that soil back out, kind of knock some of that air out of it. One difference that you might see with spring testing versus fall testing is your potassium results usually reflect a little higher, and that's due to our 2-to-1 clay soils. After a freeze and thaw cycle, we see that potassium is more readily available and reflects that way with higher potassium results. So fall testing, specifically for potassium results, the numbers are a little bit lower than spring, and that's due to the 2-to-1 clay soils have collapsed after our summer. With our warm, sometimes drier weather, those 2-to-1 clay soils collapse, and that traps the potassium inside, which is not plant available and sometimes not available to be tested at the lab. So if you're sampling for nitrates, you want to take those within 5 days of the nitrogen application, so you can see exactly what your nitrate levels are at that time, since rainfall does move those nitrates down. So another good reason to take spring soil test is to see if you have any nutrient deficiencies that could be corrected with a foliar application. Some of the results I've seen come back already, I'm able to recommend to a grower to put on, say, a zinc or a boron, because their levels are already testing low. Your sampling depth should be around 7 inches deep, maybe up to as deep as 10 inches, because that's where most of our plant roots are in the soil. So that's a good sampling depth for most of the nutrients and micronutrients. If you're testing for nitrogen, specifically nitrogen, you're going to want to test to 12 inches deep up to 24 inches deep to see where the nitrate levels reside. Additional nutrients that could benefit from deeper sampling would be boron, which is highly mobile in the soil, and sulfur, which is also very mobile in the soil. As far as frequency for soil testing in the field, most growers prefer a 2.5 to a 3.3 acre grid. On my own fields, I like to go down to a 1.1 acre grid just so I have more data points to look at. There's a lot more information that you can get from a 1.1 acre grid. I know they do cost more. A way to reduce that cost could be for you to go out and pull those soil samples yourself. Just keep in mind that these soil test results are a guide for that field, potentially for the next 2 to 4 years, depending on how often you're going to soil sample. So if you are going to soil sample your own fields, the soil sampling depth needs to be very consistent, but make sure you're pulling consistent 7-inch cores. You may hit a rock, you may hit some residue, and that's going to affect it. You're going to have to just turn that probe over and try again in a different spot. So be consistent, take your time, and do a good job. Just want to wrap up this week's episode with moth updates, specifically the black cutworm and the true army worm moth. If you want to know exact moth counts in your area, you may get a hold of us. We can provide that data to you, but just know that we've not had a significant flight yet, so the numbers remain low. That wraps up this week's episode of Fieldside Chats. We'll see you next time.